follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect with you. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. The webinar will begin in just a second. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure to select panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will be dedicating the last portion of the conversation to respond to the questions you post during the discussion. This webinar is also being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all who registered. And finally, we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Later this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be having a special conversation co-sponsored with EdWeek on their platform titled The Fall K-3 Classroom, What the Data Imply About Composition, Challenges, and Opportunities. Next week on May 4th, we have another exciting doubleheader. At 12:30 p.m., we have Radical Collaboration, Peer Partnership for Greater Local Impact. And at 3 p.m., we have another Learning Loss Recovery Challenge webinar, co-sponsored with the Overdeck Family Foundation, entitled Technology to Accelerate Learning, Tech-Enabled Solutions to Address Learning Loss. Finally, on Tuesday, May 11th, we will be having our next Crucible of Practice webinar titled Big Lift Inspiring Summers, Literacy, Learning, and Fun. We will be posting registration information in the chat box and hope you can join us for these upcoming conversations. Joining you now is Jenny Atkinson, consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much, Sierra, and thanks to all of you for joining our peer learning exchange learning conversation today. These webinars are designed with an intentionally flexible format with a goal of lifting up what communities are doing and how they're doing it, as well as what they've learned and how they intend to apply what they've learned for success in a post-COVID-19 world. As with our Crucible of Practice salons that focus on the work of one community, we believe that sharing what we've learned and gathering in conversation will lead us all to do better work, get better faster, and grow this work at scale. In March, we had a conversation about learning pods and learning hubs. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, school changed and communities across the country acted urgently to respond to new needs. Many communities saw a need for learning pods, spaces outside of schools where students could participate in remote learning and enrichment with support by adult staff and often in youth-serving organizations that families already knew and trusted. And these organizations work to provide such spaces for students. In that first peer exchange, we heard from representatives in Montgomery County, Maryland, Delaware, Chemung and Steuben counties in New York, Broward County, Florida, and Las Vegas, Nevada. We wanted to do a follow-up for participants where we would take the discussion further and think about ways to advance this work and keep the momentum going together. We will start today by hearing from 3 additional communities that have been engaged in this work in important ways. I'm happy to introduce these presenters who will talk about learning pods or hubs in their communities. Sonia Nelson is the Vice President of Resident Initiatives with the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority in Columbus, Ohio. As the management lead for the Resident Initiatives Department, her team provides a connection to resources and supports that enables residents to be safe, stable, and economically mobile. The RI team manages various HUD grants and programs, including the People Focus of the Choice Neighborhood Initiative grants and RISE Envision Center. Her department also oversees the case management and service coordination support provided by the third-party organizations that serve the residents at CMHA properties across Franklin County, which is comprised of approximately 14,000 households and 40,000 residents. Prior to joining CMHA, Ms. Nelson was the founder and chief executive officer of the social enterprise, the Firm Development Group. Dr. Maria Su is the executive director of the San Francisco Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families. DCYF is an innovative policy and grant-making agency and proud steward of the Children and Youth Fund, a landmark initiative that funds comprehensive services for children, youth, and families in the county and city and county of San Francisco. DCYF is one of the few city departments in the country dedicated exclusively to the needs of young people from birth through 24 years of age. Dr. Su oversees and administers approximately $100 million annually for children and family services, ranging from early care and education, out-of-school time services, teens and youth workforce development, family support and violence prevention and intervention programs. Dr. Su currently serves as a commissioner on the San Francisco First Five Children and Families Commission and is co-chair of the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council. And then Lakeisha Young is the co-founder and CEO of the Oakland Reach, a parent-run organization founded to make powerless parents powerful. She has dedicated her career to promoting access to quality schools because she knows firsthand that changes lives. When COVID-19 threatened to exacerbate inequities facing Reach families, the Oakland Reach created the citywide virtual hub that supports families' economic survival and their children's educational success. The hub launched in June 2020, serves over 350 families, and is delivering real academic gains. The hub has been featured on CNN, KQED, BBC, Univision, and more, and Lakeisha regularly consults with cities about replicating this work. A big welcome to all three of our presenters, and we'll start with Sonia Nelson.
Good afternoon. Thank you to Great Level Reading Campaign for allowing me to present today and share about our learning extension centers. Of course, I'm working from home, so I just want to excuse in advance my my puppy as she gets used to all the noises that are going on in the neighborhood in this beautiful day today here in Columbus, Ohio. Next slide. So I have the honor of serving as the Vice President of Resident Initiatives for the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority. CMHA is a large housing authority. We're considered a large housing authority with serving over 13,000 households and almost 40,000 residents across Franklin County. 37% of our residents are school-age children. Our largest local school district is Columbus City Schools, and they have over 50,000 students. 19% of those students live in CMHA housing. And then from a CMHA perspective, 88% of our youth attend Columbus City Schools. So with this intersectionality, that requires us to collaborate. Next slide. So let's talk about the problem. So the digital divide was previously described as those that just couldn't afford a computer. But in 2006, Jacob Nielsen broke it down even further into 3 additional components that incorporated economic, usability, and empowerment divides. So the economic divide was when basically when people just couldn't afford technology. Usability is even if they did have access to it, they wouldn't know how to be able to use it. And empowerment is where people lack the knowledge or the desire to fully embrace the power that technology can provide. It's people like me that only use the default settings on my computer or my iPad. So today, now, the digital divide not only includes those components, economic, usability, and empowerment, but now it includes equity, because those components and the deficits that exist usually impact more or felt more by disproportionately by minorities. So now when we look at what the problem is or what the digital divide is as a whole, which existed pre-COVID, now we look at the problem exacerbated by COVID and going to an all virtual schooling format. And so that prioritized the need to address the problem. Next slide, please. So how did we go about it in the design of the Learning Extension Centers? So the Learning Extension Centers, just want to note, is just one of the things that we did in recognizing the digital divide. I'll go into some of the other things that we did later on in the presentation, but as far as the Learning Extension Centers, we started to hear and work with Columbus City Schools as they try to adjust going to this virtual format. They are the ones that came up with the idea of having learning extension centers across their geography that they serve. So a learning extension center is basically a learning space. So in this space, they wanted to somewhat replicate the important parts of school. So where students can receive help in education, where they have access to the internet to be able to log into school, where they have adults there that are able there to help them and support them. And so all of these things were to be there for the youth since they weren't actually attending school. So what CMHA recognized is while Columbus City Schools was trying to find where they would house these learning extension centers across the city, we, with our community rooms at our housing communities across the portfolio, said, we already have this. So we already have space to be able to house a learning extension center. So we started to connect with various partners to see how we can operate these learning extension centers right there in our housing communities for our residents. Next slide, please. And that was the solution. So we, partnering with the Learning Extension Centers, we house 8 of the 150 Learning Extension Centers that are across the district. A key thing is that these Learning Extension Centers are free. Again, they provided, our goal is to ensure that our students have the resources and the structure that they needed for academic success. We outfitted each one of the learning extension centers and our housing communities with all brand new furniture and equipment. So CMHA invested over $400,000 to create this space that is COVID compliant. So social distancing could be there, spaces could be easily sanitized. We work with property management to make sure that that cleaning was done on a regularly scheduled basis. We made sure that we created a schedule that accommodated hours so that parents could be able to work. So the younger students had learning extension center hours during the day, where the older students had learning extension center hours in the evening. So we operated our learning extension centers from 8 a.m. in the morning and some of them until 8 in the evening to be able to not only accommodate the different age groups, but also to allow for cleaning in between each group. And so we received hotspots from our local partner, Morpsey, so that there was internet service that was available in the building. And so all of this created allowed us to be able to participate with Columbus City Schools in their Learning Extension Center model. And including, we also provided food. So we also used this as an access space for food services and provided meals for the students when they attended the Learning Extension Centers. We also used this as a point of engagement. So whenever we had any additional programming or offerings, we knew that we had access to the students and their households through the Learning Extension Centers and connected in that way. Next slide. So here is just a visual of all the Learning Extension Centers across Columbus City Schools. We are so excited to be just a couple of those dots and appreciate all of our partners that make it happen. CMHA does not operate any of our Learning Extension Centers. Community organizations like the Dream Center, After School All-Stars, Reaching for the Nations, Serving Our Neighbors Ministries, those organizations run and operate all of the programming that's within the Learning Extension Centers. And some of them have multiple sites that they operate. And partnering with these types of individuals also allowed us to make sure that we had age appropriate providers for each programming time period. So again, to provide this resource is one thing, to be part of this collective as a whole is amazing. Next slide. So, but that's just part of the problem. We recognize and we support, and we're excited that the Learning Extension Centers are there. Just wanted to quickly share the other things that we're doing around to address the digital divide. So we also have the Making Connections initiative. The Making Connections initiative is where all of our programming to address the digital divide lies. So our goal is to provide broadband access, equipment, and digital literacy to all CMHA subsidized housing communities. Subsidized housing residents. So that includes not only those that live in our housing communities, but our voucher communities. And we have about 12,000, 13,000 vouchers, voucher households all across Franklin County. And so we want to make sure that those resources are available to them as well. And so some of the things that we have done so far is, you might have seen it in the news, is that CMHA recently partnered with Spectrum, and about 11 CMHA subsidized housing communities now have free internet in their housing. So that is permanent internet for any resident that lives in that housing space, as well as in the community rooms. We have partnered with different organizations and have provided hundreds of laptops and hotspots to the communities, and we're still offering that. And we're adding computer labs, state-of-the-art computer labs, to 8 of our CMHA housing communities, and hope to do it for all of the ones that we have a community room. So we're continuing to do this work. Next slide, please. So we're continuing to do this work. We're moving into, for 2020, we had the Learning Extension Centers. We implemented summer programming where to continue the Learning Extension Center model into the summer. We provided hundreds of youth access to in-person and virtual summer camps, continued those offerings with after-school programs as we got into the new school year. provided over 25,000 meals to our youth and our families for emergency food distributions, and still work in partnership with Columbus City Schools to expand, not only just in addressing digital needs, but expand our partnerships with knowing how our intersectionality exists. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, we want to continue to address the digital equity that's within our households, continue to provide access to the communities, and continue to make sure and expand those supports in for telehealth and employment opportunities. All of that with the foundation from the Learning Extension Centers with that academic perspective. So that is basically our Learning Extension Centers and how and why we implement it. Next slide. I'll be here for Q&A. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me and my team. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks so much, Sonia, for that presentation. It's really great to hear about how you were able to take some existing spaces and quickly reimagine them so that they could work for learning for students, as well as all the wraparound services you were able to provide through that initiative. So thanks again. And next, our next presenter is Maria Su in San Francisco. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you. So thank you again for having me. It's my pleasure to be able to share with you San Francisco's innovative Community Hubs for Youth initiative. My name is Maria Su. I am the Executive Director for the Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families in the City and County of San Francisco. DCYF provides funding to nonprofit agencies throughout our city to run programs for children, youth, TAY, which are transitional age youth, and their families. We're very fortunate to work with well over 200 nonprofit agencies throughout our city, as well as with our public school district and our community college. And many city departments, including the Recreation and Parks Department, our public library, our Department on Homelessness, our Child Welfare Department, the Department of Technology, and like I said, just many different departments within our city. Next slide, please. I always start my presentation with this quote from our mayor, Mayor London Breed, in which she talks about us coming together as a village to address the wide range of learning needs of our children that's impacted by COVID. On July 23rd, Mayor Breed announced that the city would be standing up these community hubs to support our students, to support our children, knowing, as what Sonia already shared, the devastation that COVID was having, particularly on our marginalized families, and that digital connection wasn't enough. We needed to do more, and we needed to make sure that we prioritize whatever it was that we were doing more for our most disconnected and highest need families. Next slide, please. I wanted to share with you the kind of response that we took in the start of the pandemic, where the city went into shelter in place, our public school closed. The mayor asked my department, as well as the Recreation and Parks Department, to very quickly create an emergency program to serve children of hospital workers and frontline workers, because we knew that we needed to stand up our emergency operations center, and that, of course, the staff that was required most likely had children, and we needed to care for them. So literally from the start of the pandemic, we were already participating in in-person services for children and families. We extended those programs into the summer, where we stood up summer camps and summer programs. And so it naturally flowed into what we wanted to do for the fall. I will say, like Sonia mentioned, we worked very closely with our Department of Public Health to make sure that whatever it was that we created had science, but all of the health and safety measures and protocols in place. Next slide, please. So what did we create? We created these community learning hubs. And when we started talking about this in San Francisco, there was all this fear about, well, these are shadow schools. That's not what we're doing. We're not creating shadow schools. Our staff are not certified teachers. Our staff are youth development professionals, though. So we were creating these neighborhood-based programs so that children could walk to these centers and receive the in-person care and supports that they needed. We took over, we partnered, but in some cases took over places like our San Francisco Public Libraries, our Recreation and Parks Department, our nonprofit centers, our churches. We took over some even hotels and some private corporation offices, because those were where children lived, and we wanted to make sure that we did not continue to add additional stress to our public transportation system, and did not actually promote families moving across our city too much. So we wanted to make sure that the strategy was really, truly neighborhood-based. Another thing about the strategy was that we wanted to make sure that we had working family hours, and that's the Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5:30 programming hours, so the families could drop off their children, knowing that their children will be in a safe, caring environment, and then be able to go to work. We had to follow health guidance, and so that's why we had to limit the number of children within a space down to 14 children and with only 2 adults. But within this space, we were able to provide all that social emotional well-being that we knew our children needed. So once again, having a Chromebook wasn't enough for them to actually stay focused, to log in and to participate in their learning. They needed to make sure that whatever they were learning through their teachers during the school day or the Zoom day, they were able to crystallize through play in the afternoon hours. And that was the big intent of these learning hubs. Next slide, please. You all know this. Research is showing that this COVID slide, and actually, I really believe it is truly a COVID avalanche, because it's both an academic slide as well as a social emotional slide. And so together, this is what's causing and literally taking the ground underneath our children. And the hubs, the strategy was really to actually literally move the kids away from where the slide was hitting or where the avalanche was hitting. We also know that 30% of our families in San Francisco reported that they needed more support than just a Chromebook or just a hotspot. They really needed a lot of family support. They needed some mental health supports. They needed to be able to figure out a way to support their kids in learning. And then less than a third of our families that we surveyed were actually satisfied with the distance learning program. Not only was it just really hard to log in, families had to learn a new way to learn, and that's really hard. And then of course, everything is clunky. Chromebook is clunky, and connecting through a screen is not ideal. And so that was really hard. And then of course, during this time, during the May, June, July time, all of a sudden we started hearing about these pandemic pods. And then when you looked a little deeper about who was creating pandemic pods, we kind of realized it wasn't really the families that we knew were already struggling and that were already disconnected from our education system. And so we knew we needed to do something to make sure that our families who were disconnected from systems and were marginalized had access to something that they could support their children in. Next slide, please. So at the forefront of everything we do in my department for sure, but in San Francisco, we do it through the lens of equity. So we made sure that from the very beginning, that we clearly defined which children were going to be prioritized for this initiative. Remember, during this time, everyone was still in shelter in place. So we wanted to say for our marginalized students and families, we were going to move them to the front of the line and give them access first, truly flipping the script on who gets access, who gets the shiny new toy. So we prioritize families who are low income in our city, families who are living in our public housing sites and in our single room occupancy hotels, our homeless youth, our children in foster care, and our English language learners. Next slide, please. This is a very busy slide, but it definitely just shows you all the safety precautions we took in order to make sure that these hubs were going to be safe, not only for our students and our families, but also for the staff who are providing the services. We followed our Department of Public Health guidance, as well as the California public health guidance. So all the things around masking, physical distancing, screenings, stable cohorts, and of course, hand washing, hygiene, and sanitizations. Next slide, please. So what do young people get out of this? So what we were hoping was that young people would be able to come to a place that was going to be safe and clean, receive 3 nutritious meals a day, because once again, we're talking about our most marginalized families, have access to technology and internet, and of course, be supported by dedicated youth development professionals. Next slide. So how did we reach these families? We worked very closely with the departments that actually already have in-person connections to these families, like our child welfare department, like our department that runs programs for homeless families, our departments within our public housing, the department that oversees public housing within our city. We actually took a very, very hands-on approach to outreach. So we personally went out and talked to families, because once again, during that time, families were still very scared and nervous about what does this mean if I allowed my child to participate. So we went out and personally invited these families to participate with us and join this initiative. And we actually redeployed our entire department to become almost enrollment specialists, to talk to families about what their options were, answer all questions that they had, and then enroll their children into the program. Next slide, please. So at the end of the day, we ended up creating 91 hubs throughout our city. That is very concentrated. For those who know San Francisco, they're very concentrated in our highest need areas of our city. As you can see here, it's broken down by CBOs who are running the programs, Rec and Park staff, our recreation and park staff who run programs, or are giving us a site, and our CBOs come into that site and run the program themselves. All of our public library sites are actually just given to us, and our nonprofit agency comes in and run the program. And then, our public housing sites, same model, same thing. I will call out, like the purple dots here, are our private sector companies. So we actually took over a Marriott business office, where we put our homeless families in there, and they got to participate in learning in these beautiful corporate rooms with fancy corporate desks. And it was just amazing to see children walk in and say, wow, I can sit here, I can play here. Is this for me? And then not only that, the Marriott chef actually cooked for the kids. So it really, I'll get to what we learned, but it really showed us what place matters, space matters, and where we put our children matters, because it really speaks to how we view them and how we view how important they are to us. So once again, learning lessons, those things are just really important for us, learning from this process. Next slide, please. A quick snapshot of what we ended up doing. So because we actually were limited by health order and health guidance, we were only able to put 14 kids into each space, which required us to have a lot of spaces, 91 total hubs in total. We were able to serve almost 2,500 young people. I'm sorry for the text being so small, but a large number of our homeless youth were connected and provided services within the hubs. Our young people living in single room occupancy hotels, our young people in public housing, foster care youth. And you can see the ethnic breakdown here, where almost 30% of our young people were African American, 36% are Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx identified, and then 12% are Asians. I will say that in total, we have 96% of our hub youth are children of color. Next slide, please. And then just a little snippets of some outcomes. So 90% of the parents that we surveyed said that they were satisfied with their participation in the hubs. 97% of our staff felt like they had the services and the care that they needed to care for their kids. Of note, our department provided all the PPE and testing for all staff that participated in the hubs. I'm not going to read through all of this, but in general, what you'll see is that the majority of our families felt really satisfied, kids felt connected, and staff felt safe. Next slide, please. The next series of slides are actual evaluation outcome data. So we actually hired an evaluation firm to come in and really help us think about what were the benefits of these hubs. And so you can see here that students were academically engaged in as a result of participation in the hubs, which made sense because kids came in, there was an adult caregiver there who actually helped them log into their curriculum, and we had youth development professionals who provided that academic supports that kids needed. Next slide. In terms of that social emotional piece, once again, I think part of the reason why we created the hubs was to really address the isolation and the social isolation that children were experiencing. And so an overwhelming number of families and young people expressed that they did emotionally better as part of the participation in their hubs. Next slide. And then in terms of other outcomes, we were able, our nonprofits were able to actually have really intentional and meaningful connections, not only to families, but to teachers and schools. So after all of the kind of worry that these hubs were these shadow schools, teachers actually came around and realized, my goodness, this is such a huge benefit for their students. And teachers started calling into the hubs and saying, hey, I just, assigned this new homework. Can you just make sure that the child was going to follow up, or, he or she wasn't paying attention today? Can you just kind of follow up for us? And so we developed this really great relationship and dialogue with teachers and schools that the CBOs are now hopefully solidifying so that we can bring that same level of connection into the school year. Next slide, please. So what did we learn as a department? So as a department, for me, I feel top thing is that leadership matters. And it definitely starts from the top. So when I presented to our mayor the idea of the hubs, she immediately said, yes, by all means, whatever it takes. And when you set a tone that high, and then everyone else can start seeing their space or their place on this big table, so build a coalition, it made it much easier to start moving people around to make sure that we could create something that was malleable. So a third point is that we had to act quickly, because you can't just take time to plan and then to think and then to plan. So we actually had to plan, iterate, because we had to be really flexible. So the models that we started out in the beginning had to be tweaked and changed as we went along. And I think very importantly, we created a shared vision, and then we announced the shared vision. So then we had to hold ourselves accountable to it. And so there was no backing off for it when we said we were going to do it. So we actually had to do it. And then using data. So using data to inform how we were going to do it, where we were going to do it, and what we were going to do. And I think truly the real unicorn in all of this is that we had flexible funding. So our department was so fortunate enough to have these dollars that we could reallocate. And we had the relationship with our nonprofit agencies that we could actually go to them and say, we need you to do this. We'll move our monies to make sure that you had the resources, but we need you to actually now remodel, reprogram, and do this with us. And that has been, the real secret sauce to all of this. Next slide, please. Partnerships. You can read the list of all the departments that we worked with very closely. Next slide. So I do want to touch really quickly on where do we go from here? So what we know is that this last year has been a horrible year, not only for businesses and residents of cities and for people's mental health and physical health and overall well-being, but we know that our kids really did suffer. They struggled, and so we've made the commitment to double down this summer and say that summer is going to be our summer of recovery. And it's going to be the summer where we are going to work really closely with as many children as possible to make sure that they catch up. So we're going to infuse, we're going to run summer programming, but we're going to infuse curriculum into the summer programming to really try to combat this learning loss. We're going to make sure that there's comprehensive supports for families inside the summer programs, and then also provide mental health supports, so that families who are traumatized by what has happened, or children who have regressed, will have access to those mental health supports. Next slide, please. And so we are calling it Summer Together. So for those of you who want to find out, please go to our website, dcyf.org/summertogether. We are planning to operate, actually at this point, the count is almost 120 sites throughout our city. We plan to go bigger than 2,500 kids. We are hoping to serve up to 20,000 children this summer. We're going to operate programs in school sites. We're going to operate programs in rec and park sites, nonprofit sites, and run it all through summer. And really, really be intentional with having academic integration into fun, as well as some hidden things like trauma-informed programming, as well as ethnic studies. So we really, really want to take this opportunity and not waste a pandemic, and infuse as many things as we can to really help our students build on their resilience and thrive. I think that's my last slide. Next slide. Yeah. So in San Francisco, our department, our only goal in life is to make San Francisco a great place to grow up. And we do everything we can to try to make that happen. So thank you so much. I am open for questions.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was a wonderful overview of the work you do. And I loved hearing about the youth development piece of it, as well as the holistic approach that you've been able to take. And, even in not a pandemic, it's impressive to hear the work that has been going on in San Francisco and Columbus, and excited to hear more. We will take questions at the end of the final presentation. So if I've seen a couple of questions come through, but if anyone else has a question, please feel free to post it in the Q&A box, and we'll be tracking those and circle back to those questions at the end of the presentations. Our next presenter is Lakeisha Young in Oakland. Welcome, Lakeisha.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me. Want to I know we have some, just kind of paying attention to the participants, want to keep it fresh and lively. One sense of, one bit of interesting context, it's cool to kind of follow San Francisco. I was born and raised in San Francisco, and it was a great place to live when I was growing up. Oakland is right over the Bay Bridge, for those of you who are tuning in from other parts of the country. And what's going to be really a little bit different in the way I talk about what has the sort of hub idea or pod idea is that what we built was built grassroots from parents and from the needs and aspirations of families, right? And so before I kind of get into talking about what I call what's underneath the hub, I want to start with a 90-second video just to kind of center into the spirit of what we do in Oakland and who we serve. So with that, if you guys can press play.
What does it look like to provide low-income Black and Brown families with the same educational privilege as white families? The Oakland Reaches Virtual Family Hub. I'm Lakeisha Young, co-founder and CEO of the Oakland Reach. First, let me tell you about Mama Williams. She went through the public schools here in Oakland over 40 years ago, graduated from high school, but she never learned to read. Then those same schools failed her kids. Today in 2021, less than 30% of Black and Brown kids in Oakland are reading on grade level. Mama Williams would die before that's the life of her grandkids. We built the Oakland Reach because of people like Mama Williams, Black and Brown moms and grandmas who are demanding power to end the intergenerational cycle of miseducation. Our virtual family hub is our most powerful move yet. When COVID closed schools, we decided to build our own privilege and deliver high quality instruction right into our families' homes. Last June, we offered live academic instruction for 200 students, and they made major academic gains. This summer, we'll reach over 1,000 students, and with families taking the lead, we can get to 20,000 students in 10 years. It won't be the first time a national movement for liberation originated from Oakland. Our hub is the parent-centered movement to offer access to excellence for every Mama Williams. Our hub is the pathway to racial equity and healing.
All right, thank you. And I know the sound is not that great. And so I think Jenny just put in the link. And if you go to the link, it not only has the video that you can watch, it also has our one pager, of which at some point, Jenny, I'm going to have you present the one pager. Let me, as I get into talking about our hub, I want to really set the scene. And I like to tell a story, right? And so it's March 13th, 2020. It's the last day of school in Oakland, right? And it's also probably 2 weeks before what was supposed to be spring break. And so just kind of an interesting kind of time of the month. And we find out that, schools are closing because of this virus that they want to contain. Robocalls go out from the district. We, as a education advocacy org, who supports families, our work prior to COVID has been really focused on advocacy, policies. We had a huge opportunity ticket. We had policy wins. We were running a campaign on literacy that was huge and getting some national attention. So that was our work. Our team was a team of community organizers. When all this news hit, we got on the phone with our families, just making sure, because our families changed their phone numbers quite a bit. So they may not have gotten that robocall. So we wanted to make sure they knew that there was not going to be any school on Monday, kind of telling them catch up with the news. check in with your kids, whatever, and we'll be back on the phone with you on Monday. So Monday, March 16th, that is actually when we started like getting on the phone with our parents and like really talking to them, just to understand kind of like how up to speed they were, if they were having any impact, you know, from this, because people, a lot of our families are frontline workers, and they were seeing an immediate economic impact from this shutdown. By the time we got to Wednesday of that week, it was very clear, at least, that our first COVID response needed to be some way to get cash assistance to our families. So we launched like what we call a Reach Relief Fund. And we had never done this before. We were going to raise like $50,000, but we ended up raising $400,000, right, for our families. And we were able to give out money to 1,000 families twice in March and in May. So while we were running this now behemoth of a relief fund, because our families were struggling with keeping lights on, paying rent, putting groceries in the refrigerator, on top of just this huge disconnect that was happening at the time in Oakland, you know, there was just like, right, an immediate pivot. Although school was out for a couple of weeks, then it was like, well, how does this transition look? And, you know, the district was setting up food pantries. They were setting up, you know, slowly setting up ways for kids to get Chromebooks, but there was just a real systemic disconnect with the schools as well as with the families, right? And our families did not, a lot of them did not have internet access. At least over 50% of our families didn't have like any kind of real good internet access. They did not have the devices. And then they had lost connection with their teachers, because our teachers union in our district was negotiating time and how teachers were going to teach. And that created a delay as well. So it was really one of those moments, right? It was really one of those defining moments where you are listening to the aspirations and the pains and the frustrations of your families. And you're looking at a system that you've already been fighting, pushing, strongholding for half a decade around focusing on quality, moving our kids to quality, and moving them away from a pipeline to prison onto a pipeline to college. So in that moment, you start to think, the kids are at home. They're at home with their parents right now. So what is the best move for us as an organization to best support our families? Do we turn them back into a system that was already struggling? We were in an education crisis before we were in a health crisis. So like, do we turn them back into there? Do we start banging on the doors, like, help us now, do something now? Or do we take this as an opportunity to build the thing that we've been fighting for the system to build over the past half a decade? Maybe we need to show them what it is that we want to see for our babies. And that's what we did. What we did was build what we have been fighting, going to hundreds of board meetings, policies, all of this thing. We just built it. And that was the hub. And we were calling it the hub, you know, way back in March of 2020. I think what's most important is not the name hub, not the name pod, but what is underneath it, right? And with that, I would love for Jenny, if you could just, could you project the virtual family hub one pager? Because I would love to go to I really want to focus on the second page of that. As I sort of, like I said, I like to weave a story so you can kind of see this journey that we've been on. Yeah, let's go to page 2 a little bit. Okay. So as I said, we were providing funds for families, and we were also listening to families and the stress around, hey, this is my kid that's supposed to go to college. Like, this is the child that's supposed to disrupt the intergenerational poverty in our family. Like, what's going to happen, right? Like, what are we going to do? This helplessness, right? And so the hub was really about integrating the academic aspirations and needs of families along with the socioeconomic ones. And I really want to name the socioeconomic component, because when you are supporting low-income families, it is very important to be thinking about the complete sustainability of that family. Our families are completely, and so many families are completely committed to their kids' education, and they have real life circumstances that they have to deal with every single day. And living in places like San Francisco or Oakland, which are high cost of living areas to live in, these things are exacerbated. So we wanted to make sure that this hub didn't just look at sort of one aspect of a child heading to college, which is the academics, we want to think about how is the family supported and sustained, because if the family's not okay, that child is not going to be okay. And I think that that is something that can get lost in the dialogue, right? So with that, that's how we built the hub. The first phase of the hub was our summer school. So we ran a summer hub in the summer of 2020. We had 200 students at that time, K through 8. Our hub was broken into 3 centers. So our K through 2 students were in something called the Literacy Liberation Center. And our 3rd through 8th graders were participating in something called the National Summer School Initiative. This organization, which is now called Cadence Learning, was just getting off the ground to build this. They were seeing that this need was coming, so they were building this. So it was just a perfect, just serendipitous in terms of like being able to connect with them, and the model they had was excellent. And then 3rd was our Family Sustainability Center. FSC is what we call it. And that was really about how do we make sure we are helping parents not just survive this pandemic, but potentially thrive and come out better on the other side. So that the FSC is about focusing on the academic and socioeconomic resources and workshops for the families to keep building that muscle, right? And all of this, I would say, like I said, was virtual. So these were the 3 centers. And in the summer, our kids went to school. They attended school Monday through Friday. The academic classes were more like from 9 to 12, 9 to 12, 9:30 to 12:45. And then 3 days a week, the kids had the opportunity to participate in social enrichment. And that was what's really important. These children are our future leaders. We wanted to make sure that we were not burdening them with this idea of just like, you're falling behind, you got to catch up. We wanted to make sure that we were like just feeding into their passions and helping them grow as humans. And so they had opportunity to participate in martial arts, yes, virtually, and they got to do cooking and they got to do creative writing. And these are sort of programs and offerings that, they may not have been able to afford had all this been happening in person. Some of the other components that we put into the summer school, which was really key to thinking again about the academic and socioeconomic sustainability of families, was one, our team of community organizers pivoted to become what we call family liaisons, which is just more of like an integrated role with the family. And because of that role, our families felt supported. Our attendance was like 83%. We had 83% attendance, whereas our district had 35%, just closing out that spring. And a lot of that is because of the connections and the supports. We call our family liaisons like the educational social workers, right? So that was one of the secret sauces of the hub. We also made sure that every family, every kid had a Chromebook, and every family that did not have any internet access, we made sure that they got that through a hotspot at the time. But on top of that, it's just not enough. And I think Maria may have said that earlier. It's just not enough to give families infrastructure when they've never, you have to give them infrastructure, but that infrastructure cannot just be hardware. So we hired and brought on some tech support. So we partnered, because that was another like key thing around the hub, is like, how do we bring our local community organizations into this work to support our community? So we partnered with the local tech support company in East Oakland, and they provided the tech support for our families. So Monday through Friday during business hours, our families had the opportunity to call and get like immediate support, because at that time, if our parents were having technical support issues, their kid couldn't get into class. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't just have the hardware, but we had the support. And then something else that was critical and key was that at the end of the summer, every family who successfully completed it got a stipend of up to $500, right? And that first 5 weeks was phenomenal. It was phenomenal in terms of the show up and engagement, but we didn't do this just to do it. We did it because our fight prior to COVID has all been about increasing educational outcomes for our kids, and literacy being a huge part of it. If kids can't read, then there's not much else that they can do. And actually, right before COVID hit, we were running, like I said, a literacy campaign called Literacy for All, which was not just focusing on early literacy, but was focusing on literacy for the whole family, even adult literacy. Right? We have mamas and grandmamas that graduated from the same schools that their grandkids and kids are attending and are functioning illiterate. So we're like, if we want to create some systemic change around literacy, we've got to be making sure that everybody in that house can read, right? So we took and we were pushing our district, of which they had just signed and approved unanimously an MOU right before COVID hit, to move to the science of reading, right? So we took all the elements of the campaign we were doing, the education we had been doing as an advocacy org, and put that to do direct service. And the results were amazing. At the end of the 5 weeks, 60% of our K-2 students went up 2 or more reading levels on the district-wide assessment, and 30% went up 3 or more reading levels. And this was all virtual, right? And so it was really like, wow, we're onto something. We are onto something, right? And so then it's now time to move into the fall. And when we moved into the fall, I mean, you know, there was a lot of buzz about what will Oakland Reach's hub become? Will they become a school? Will they this, that, and the other? And oh, by the way, the part that I missed was we also hired teachers over the summer. So we hired 14 teachers to teach, you know, the synchronous learning to our kids. So that was also a great component of it too. And we hired, and the other kind of cool piece about it is that in the K-2 Literacy Liberation Center, those teachers were actually the paraprofessionals in the district. They were like the reading tutors and literacy tutors at the schools. So we gave them the professional development, really invested in their PD to actually be able to teach these classes online. So these, like we call them the literacy liberators, there was like 6 of these OUC paraprofessional reading folks who helped who really were responsible for those gains. So I think that was also starting to tell a narrative around like, who are the unsung heroes? Who are the people we're actually looking at and investing in when we think about moving academic outcomes? And it definitely was a way to say, look, Oakland Unified School District, you got talent in your district. We just pulled your talent and they just got our kids reading and going up grade levels. So what's the problem, right? Like, what is the problem? Where is the collective will to make sure that kids are first? So once again, like I said, we moved into the fall. Now kids are going back to school, but it's all virtual. And so we're trying to think about, what do we become, right? There's not enough time. We didn't finish our summer school until about a week and a half before regular school started. So it was really like, we need to really sort of create a framework, a model, and think about how we support families. And so the best solution ended up being like after school programming. So we started running after school programming Monday through Thursday from 3 to 5. And we listened to our families and built the solution. So we had surveyed our families. Our families wanted literacy, tutoring and support, math. They wanted culturally relevant curriculum. So our partnerships really focused on that. They wanted to keep their social enrichments. They wanted their family liaison. They were like, the family liaison is keeping me afloat. So we made sure that we built that, and we're an advocacy org. So what we also wanted to make sure we did was that our family liaisons were supporting our families on a day-to-day basis around advocacy. We would call it like, you know, access, assess, and advocate, you know, helping the families access the academic day virtually, assess the quality of that academic day, and then advocate where need to be. So that's how the fall ran. And then some amazing things happened. And what ended up happening was, while we were planning to really set our advocacy agenda to push this hub into our system, because we had built this hub outside of the system with philanthropic funding, we were sort of starting to pivot to say, how do we push this to serve more students, right, in Oakland? And at the time that happened, a funder decided to invest in cities that wanted to expand hubs and districts that wanted to expand hubs and were willing to like partner with community-based organizations like ours. It was like the perfect match for us. And so we really got set at the table with the Oakland Unified School District and did a proposal to have our hub model replicated within the school district. And we were selected as one of the cities. And so as we closed out 2020, we were now not just preparing to continue to run our external hub, which at this point, we are now at 400 students. We are now preparing for a larger expansion within the school district. So when January rolls around, we were at the table, hand in hand in partnership with the school district to expand this hub. So right now on April 27th, we have expanded the hub to 6 schools within the school district, because our hub is citywide and we serve kids from across 80 different district and charter schools. So this is a very targeted expansion. So it's 6 schools. I think it's of several hundred students, right? And we supported the district in hiring 30 more staff, right? So they have hired, half of that has been family liaisons and half of that has been literacy tutors. This hub expansion is really going to focus on literacy, as well as the other components of the hub, like the Family Sustainability Center and all of this other academic programming that we provide. And now that we have just launched that, we're going to be working with those families. We're launching another summer hub because 78% of our families said that they wanted summer learning. We listened to our families before we build the solutions. And so when our families said that they wanted summer learning, then we got that going. And we're also going to be adding high school. Our high school kids are really suffering. And although we've offered high school programming, we haven't had as many high school kids sign up. So we're kind of doing a whole design hack and innovative sort of like just model to really attract and engage the high school students this summer. So we are going from last summer serving 200 students to this summer serving up to probably 900 students. So just a huge leap. And while we're preparing for summer, another thing I want to say about the summer is that our families, people are getting vaccinated. 34% of our families have been vaccinated. We surveyed our families, 34% got vaccinated. Another 40-something% said that they were kind of on the fence. They wanted more education. So we're doing more in our FSC. We're doing more vaccine and COVID related things. It's very confusing to families when you're in a community where people are getting COVID, getting sick and dying, then you're catching this like ad hoc news. It's very frightening for families, right? And then, Johnson & Johnson like has a vaccine and then they talk about pulling it, then they put it back on. So unless you're studying this stuff all day, it leaves you with a lot of uncertainty. So this is why we try to really create the space for families to get really informed, get focused, and then make the best decision for their families. We don't push families to get vaccinated or not, but we just want to make sure our families are making informed decisions and not decisions based on like fear. And so that's a huge piece. And so we are preparing for a very large summer with our families, we're also going to be piloting outside programming as well as outside socialization. So 85% of our families said that they wanted their kids and they wanted to participate. People want to get together, people want to reconnect. So I think it creates a huge opportunity for us to do a combination of like structured programming and then just ways for folks to socialize and get together. And as you know, everybody picked up the COVID-19. So we're thinking about like parent fitness camps and yoga and all these other things. But we really are excited about thinking about how we use our green space and outdoor space to do a lot of that programming. So the academic programming will still continue virtually for like 3 hours a day. And then we will then set up this really robust outdoor programming. And then we're at the table with our superintendent to talk about the fall, because so far 50% of families saying that they do not want to go back to school. So while we're waiting to get the data for who's opting into and opting out of fall, who's opting into fall distance learning, we think that there's going to be a lot of families that are still going to choose to keep their kids at home. Our school year starts August 9th. So that's not going to be, school is out the end of May. So it's only going to be a couple of months. I'm not sure how much is going to shift in those couple of months, but what we want to make sure we do, which is why we built this hub, is we want to be in front of this thing. We do not want our families suffering because they've made a choice to keep their kids at home. And I think that like the last part I'll say before wrapping up is we built a virtual hub because we were in a pandemic. But the hub we built and the 5 components here, which is high quality instruction, social emotional enrichment, community support, tech training, which I didn't go a lot into the tech stuff. I can if people have questions about it, and then economic development. All those things are important, whether you have a virtual hub or an in-person. This is really what we believe is the right kind of model to be educating families. This is what centers families. This hub model centers families first. The system responds to families versus the other way around. So, sorry, I saw a question here. Are you talking about our superintendent in Oakland? If you're talking about our superintendent in Oakland Unified, there is no mandatory go back to school. Yeah, I'm in Oakland, California. I'm not in Broward County. So that would be, I think that's really the main thing that we are really pushing, is what we're really pushing is this model is the model that really centers the needs and aspirations of lower income families. And as these American Rescue Plan dollars come in, you know, we have so many of our districts have operated from a deficit mindset. And right before COVID hit, being in the most sunken place around district and charter and just a hustle for bodies, but not any conversation around quality. I want to say this today, that mindset does not shift easily just because you pour a lot of dollars into a district, right? You have got to have a game plan and you have got to have an infrastructure. And that's what I believe. That's what I think is the beauty of this hub. We really built this for our families, but now I think it really is a model, both locally and nationally, for how to serve the families who have been who have not been at the table. It's like giving the families the best, so then they now fight for the best. So I'll close it out there.
Thank you so much, Lakeisha. I'm glad you were able to join us to bring the parent perspective and the ways that you have really championed the needs and desires of the students and families in Oakland. At one point you said, we just built it, like we just built it. And I thought, oh boy, there's a lot of hard work behind that "we just built it" phrase. And as a parent myself, I'm just really inspired by the work happening in Oakland, and please come to my neighborhood next. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it now over to my colleague, Ron Fairchild, who's going to be leading the Q&A discussion portion of our conversation today. Thanks, Ron.
Well, thank you, Jenny. And I just want to say thank you to Lakeisha, to Maria, and to Sonia for doing such an excellent job with their presentations today. We have had a number of questions, but you know, I just want to acknowledge at the beginning, our hunch was that a follow-on conversation to last month's lively learning exchange conversation would be worth it and would be helpful as we consider how what we've learned from learning pods, hubs, would really represent a keeper post-pandemic. And I think what you heard today in terms of the learning extension centers in Columbus, the community learning hubs in San Francisco, and the virtual family hubs, we have communities that are thinking very creatively about these efforts, not as a time-limited effort for a particular window in response to a pandemic, but more as standing capacity for what we need going forward. And I think you saw three really great and very different models and approaches for how they're thinking about it. I would love to go to Elena's question first, because I think it speaks to this question of what next and how you're thinking about this notion of this work being a keeper, something that you would have standing capacity for going forward, and what you've learned from it. And so, Elena, I was going to ask you if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and asking your question about the future of places and spaces in a much more expanded sense of where and how learning can happen.
Hi, Elena Kennedy from Denver, Colorado. And I'm curious about the future of the programming, specifically as it relates to the connections you have built between community-based organizations and your districts. Really thinking about how districts are sort of coming to the table and thinking about how how so much of these programs could inform the future of sort of how students are supported through CBOs, and also, making sure you're not just dismantling all the incredible work that you've done, that you can build on it going into the future.
Thank you, Elena. Who would like to answer that first among our three panelists? Maria, I see you. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so thank you, Elena, for the question. And, I do want to say that in San Francisco, we've been thinking about this community schools model or extended day model, like whatever you want to call it, which is to take learning from the day and then expand it to other caring adults. And we thought that that was like the right way to go. However, after this experience, what we've realized is, yes, that is true. However, we really truly, and actually I love it the way Lakeisha talked about it, we really truly need to empower the true people on the ground. So you need to empower the staff of these nonprofit agencies and their families. And so quite literally right now, my people, our team at DCYF is really thinking about how do we redo or rethink about grant making to nonprofit agencies so that we can allow highest level of flexibility, because that's the one thing that was like the true secret sauce to this, was that we said to CBOs, look, we're going to take all those performance measures and we're just going to press pause. We're going to put all those restrictions of usage of funds, we're going to press pause. You use those dollars, buy the food, buy the diapers, buy the formulas, buy whatever it is that you need, your families need, because you know your family is the best. And that's what yielded the rapid response and meeting the families where they are. So we're thinking about, the next iteration of grant making. How do we do that? How do we do perhaps more global general operating dollars for CBOs so that they can use those dollars to pivot and move and get to where they really, really need?
Thank you, Maria. Sonia, do you want to go next?
I'll say this goes into what we recognize as a larger opportunity in supporting our community partners. Most discussions, especially when you have some around social determinants of health, everyone talks about how housing is needed. And so we recognize that we're the largest organization, we're an organization that has the most access to individuals that are housed. And so if you want to model and demonstrate how successful programming can be if people had safe, stable, affordable housing, we're the ones. And so now that we're recognizing that and we're sharing that message, funders are looking for that, and they're looking to make this connection to be able to test those kind of models. So as we go forward, we're looking at data. And so how do we take the data, the housing regulatory data that we have, and start enhancing it with social service type data? So we're taking that together to see what that data tells us, and to continue to have those conversations, collaboration conversations with Columbus City Schools and the other school districts in the area to determine how we partner. And the other thing I would say is inclusion and collaboration. And so the inclusion piece, just like Lakeisha was saying, we did a lot of things really fast because of COVID, and we did not have proper insight from our families before we did it. And so we need to take this time to sort of reset while we're continuing to look at our data, enhance, and what is there before we make any larger, more longer term plans. We need to get the insight from our, she gets the toy right when I start talking. I thought I hit them all. But we need to get the insight from our families, and to really lean on the saying, nothing for us without us. Thank you, Ellie. So that is, so data, inclusion, and collaboration is going to be our next steps.
Yeah, I want to just say, Sonia, go ahead, Lakeisha, jump in.
No, I was just responding to Elena. First, I wanted to say if this is Elena's son on her shoulder, that little boy, I'm gonna steal him. He is adorable. And like that face, I just can't stop looking at it. But what I primarily picked up from Elena is like, how does this continue? How does this continue to like reshape the way we think about education? And I think that is exactly the right conversation to be having, because part of like what I didn't share is like, everybody, the school reopening conversation has not, and I think, Maria, no one know, I'm right on the other side. What we've been hearing on the other side of Oakland, about San Francisco. We are not hearing enough about what you guys are doing, right? This narrative gets hijacked to talk about what more privileged families want. So I like do everything I can to talk about there is another narrative. And it doesn't mean that lower income families, that some of them don't want to go back to school, but a large number of them don't want to go back to school for different reasons. And we need to think about the fact that like, we don't want to pull these extreme levers. This is probably the first time in forever that people are focusing on education and that money is coming into education. And this is like 5 years from now, we can be at a totally different place. So I do believe like what we see as the future is what we're doing right now. We are inside of the district. We run an outside, hub, but we're inside of the district. And I would really push other districts to like bring in those groups to do that work, and then expanding it to the families that need it the most. And I think this also answers someone else's question, Ron, there about, they had asked if our hub was at school sites. Our hub is not specifically at school sites because it's virtual. But with the hub expansion that we're doing with the school district, the district has actually set up in-person hubs. So I think I mentioned about those 5 elements of the hub that can happen in person or remotely. We're also helping them to tighten their in-person hubs to make sure that they are really embodying those elements. So again, and I believe that there is money. There is money coming in. Where is it going to go, right? Who is going to get served by it? And 5 years from now, to me, the results are, can kids read? Right now in Oakland, less than 30% of kids are reading on grade level. Money will not change that. It will not change that if you do not have the collective will to keep the focus on the babies. And we see what happens when you actually have a collective will to do that, how kids can start to read. The last part I'll just add is parents are more activated and engaged than they've ever been. So you can try to turn that ship back to the normal or the old way, but families are not having it, right? Parents are not having it. So we either evolve and adapt and innovate. And luckily in Oakland, we are showing a model for it. But regardless if there's a model or not, parents are itchy. They've had to adjust. They've been at home and they're not taking the BS, And so this system will only change when not just privileged families are constantly strongholding the system, but when the lower income families who actually take up more of the system are also pushing and pulling as well, and not saying do something, but do this. And this is where the hub model comes in. Do this, right? Replicate what we're doing. You don't have to figure it out, but this is family-centered and family-focused.
Yeah, and those 5 components, Lakeisha, that you shared are good no matter what space or place you're in. And fundamentally, this is about bringing freedom, liberation, justice where it is needed. And so thank you for sharing that. I would love to go. There were a couple of other questions, and I suspect others might have some of the questions that Karen raised in the Q&A. There were the one question I think Lakeisha handled rather well, which was about specific to hers, but the other 3 were clusters of questions around some of the barriers, staffing, recruiting staffing, getting high levels of attendance, addressing social emotional challenges and issues in the context of your hubs. Any quick hits and responses on some of those challenges?
From San Francisco, so for staffing, because of the health guidance and the health order, we were actually quite limited in how many adult staff we could have inside a site. So for us, it was only 14 children and 2 adults inside a space. So, you know, if a hub, say a rec center, was really large and had maybe 3 community rooms, then essentially you could have 3 pods, 3 cohorts in that hub. But even when you have 3 cohorts, that means you can only have a total of 6 staff inside working in those classrooms. So quite frankly, for the school year that we're in now, we didn't have a major staffing issue because we were able to redeploy all of our funding to staff that were already, without this pandemic, these people would be the ones working in the after school space on school sites. Now, what we did have to do was increase funding for nonprofits because they were only providing after school hours. And so what we were asking them to do is provide full day programming. And so we had to dig deep. And this is where leadership comes in, where the mayor said, yes, this is very important. And so, yes, DCYF, you can have those additional dollars to make staff that were part-time, full-time. And I don't remember the other part of the question.
That's okay. Let's stop there on the staffing piece. Maybe I could ask Sonia and Lakeisha to weigh in on anything else related to attendance and or social emotional development, lessons learned from your efforts.
Oh, okay. I was like, Sonia, do you want to go first? So yeah, I think like in terms of the social emotional component, again, the great thing about having a parent-centered hub is being able to be really responsive to the needs of families. And so what started to happen was our parents were like, this is great. This is wonderful what you guys are providing. And we are stressed out and we're just like feeling so much pressure and stress. So we did 2 things. And I call this a balance of feeding and fishing, right? We are trying to teach our families how to fish, but part of that is feeding them too. Sometimes you have to feed people to show them how to fish. And so it was that combination of like, yes, let's be responsive to that. But how do we build the leadership of our families to solve their own problems, right? And create the space to do that. So the parents who brought it up, we were like, hey, what if we support you to build a community where parents can come together virtually and start to support each other? So that turned into a parent lounge. So I think Monday, parents come into the parent lounge and there's no set agenda and no set anything, right? They just come to like share and learn and vent, right? But that's now being facilitated by our parents, right? Not by the team, but by our families. So that's more organic and informal, but creates that leadership opportunity. On the second hand, in a more formal way, through our FSC, we've brought in mental health experts. And I want to note that these mental health experts we brought in were both African-American and Latina. And I think it's very key when you are bringing in mental health experts into our communities, they need to look like our folks because there's a lot of stigma around mental health in our communities. So you've got to make sure that these folks, they look like our folks. Now that we've gotten kind of data from that first session, we are now figuring out what is our longer term mental health strategy going to be? What are the ways? Because I think the more integrated it is, the better. The ways it's integrated, because sometimes the mental health piece is, like I said, the gathering and doing the yoga, right? So it's not always what we think that's like therapy one-on-one. Some of that may be small group, but it's about thinking about how we weave in the mental health needs of families through the programming so that it's seamless, but boosts that sense of community and well-being and support that can tend to compromise our mental health.
Exactly why I wanted you to go first, because you said everything that I would have said. We're doing the same thing. So we have to figure out how we incorporate. Nobody wants to sit down and have a conversation about their mental health, but we can bring line dancing and have and crowd up a room. And so let's incorporate it into day-to-day for mental wellness, overall mental wellness, and take it from that approach.
Well, I
Sonia,
know
let's
we are out of
collaborate,
time.
'cause I'm a great line dancer and we never even thought about line dancing, but I now have a visual in this big park of everybody line dancing. I'm gonna send a video. I love this, Sonia. Love it.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I love it too. And I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone in the GLR network for not only pioneering such a powerful new vision, but taking the time to share it with the rest of the network and lay down the track that other folks can follow. We are going to go ahead and wrap up and include an invitation, and we'll follow up with all of you after the webinar, all of our participants and speakers, to continue this follow-on conversation about learning pods and hubs, what we're learning, how we capture that and make that knowledge actionable across our network. So thank you very much. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, and take good care.
Thank you.